Hey everyone, today I have a review on this Chinese-made bass trombone. This one specifically is made by CG, not CG Con, just CG. So I'm sure they're trying to use that as a little tactic to kind of confuse some people into getting, this horn rather than something that's a little nicer. Anyway, so this instrument is made in China, as I mentioned, and it's the same as some other horns you might have seen around. I think Wessex used to use this design. I believe they kind of updated it now. I looked at their website, they have different valve caps and I believe a different trigger. But I know back in the day I had one of their older horns and it was pretty much the same, or if not exactly the same as this horn. These are also made by Jinbao. I'm not sure if this one specifically came from the Jinbao factory, but I have a feeling it did. They're all kind of the same. They all come from the same place. But these are a good option for a low-end student bass trombone for a low price. Say you're just starting off on bass trombone. You're like, well, I want to have my own, but I don't want to have to spend, thousands of dollars in order to get something. This would be a good option. They can usually be found around $1,000 or less. Maybe less than 800 or 900 if you get them used, which can be a great option. Or even if you're doubling. Say you play tenor trombone, you're like, well, I think I might need bass trombone later on, or I just want to try it out for a little bit, but I want to have my own. These can be a great option since they're low cost, they work relatively well. We'll get into that, and it's a good starting point. So some features of this. The specs, first off, starting at the top end, is it's a 562 single bore slide, pretty standard for entry level trombones and most standard trombones. And coming up here is once again dual independent rotors, which is super handy because you can obviously use both of them independently of each other. So you don't have to press one to press the other. So there are the first one is in F and the second one is in G flat, and together give you a D, which is pretty standard tuning for bass trombone. And then coming around here, it's open wrap, which is super handy on bass specifically because you are in the trigger register a lot of time, and so you need as much help as you can get, so having less resistance with an open wrap can help. And then the bell is a rose brass bell, standard 9.5 inches, nothing too crazy, but it is kind of nice to have the rose brass bell. I like the way it looks personally, and I think the sound is just a little bit softer. I think it fit a little bit darker as well, and it fits the bass trombone sound a little bit better, just in my personal opinion. So some other things about this, if you've noticed, it's a copy of the King 7B. You can tell by the valve wraps, the way they're done, also this little finger ring and the curved brace that they have going on here, which is something that pretty much only King did. It was kind of their thing. So this copies it. And it's pretty much a direct copy of the King 7B. So some pros to this horn. First of all, I'd say having independent rotors is a plus because a lot of times when you're going for a lower price range, you can only find dependent horns, which means that you have to press the first trigger in order for the second one to work. So having both independently opens up a lot more options for playing different notes in different positions and things. You can play G flat in first, you can play F in second if you have F to D for whatever reason on the triggers. There's certain things that you can do that give you a little more flexibility. I find that really useful. I'm a big fan of independent rotors. And then the slide, it's good and bad. I'd say it's a plus though because it works. And for some horns, you can't always say that, especially when you get cheaper ones. But this one is pretty smooth. It's not the fastest, but hey, it moves pretty smoothly. There's no catches or anything, and it blows pretty well. Also, the rotors being open wrap, as I mentioned, makes it a little easier to play. I found that it wasn't as stuffy as some of the other horns I've played, which is great, especially for something that is such a low price. So being open wrap, being fairly open, free blowing valves is definitely a plus. But some downsides, I'd say, are the ergonomics. Of course, trombone isn't a super ergonomic horn to begin with, but this one in particular, I could not hold it comfortably. If you've noticed, I have added this brace. This doesn't come with, this is the Edwards bullet brace here, and I had to put it on because I couldn't play it otherwise. My hand kept slipping and moving, and I couldn't brace up against here properly because of this ring, which I'm also not a fan of, but it can be easily removed as two solder points and just pop it right off. But anyway, I had to add this brace because I couldn't reach the triggers. My hand kept slipping around, especially because bass trombone is a little bit heavier, obviously, with more things on it. So trying to support it on just your couple fingers and all that, it really did not lend itself well to my specific hand shape. It was not a fun time. So I had to have this brace so I could even play it at all. But another big thing is the second valve here. If you can see, it's bent a little bit because when I got it, it pretty much came straight out. It was way out here. I couldn't reach it. It was too far away. So I gave it a couple bends with my pliers and very carefully put it into a place where I can touch it a little bit better and get to it. But it works fine just now. But I'd say that if you do get one of these stock from the factory, definitely take it into a tech, or if you're handy enough with pliers, be careful with it because, again, being Chinese made, it's not the best metal, and I'd worry about it snapping. But honestly, I was able to give it a couple little tweaks. If you know what you're doing, you can get it into a good hand position, and then it works just fine from then on. And the first trigger is all right. It's a little bit far away, I think, but of course that could just be my brace placement. But overall, it's not bad with hand brace. I'd recommend getting one. Whether it's this one or like the Neotech grips are really cheap. If it works with these, those braces are much bigger. And while I prefer them on most horns, some of them they don't quite work with the way that the triggers are set up. Sometimes it gets in the way. So the Neotech grip might be an option if you can try it and see if it works. And then there's sometimes straps that go on the lead pipe end here and then wrap around and you can hold it. Kind of the Yamaha strap is one such option, but you'd have to get this ring removed. But anyway, I definitely recommend having some sort of brace when trying to play this and getting the second trigger adjusted. But after that, it works pretty well. But it's kind of unfortunate that it's not super easy to hold or to reach right out of the box. Another downside is the slide. I know it says it works great, but there is a little bit of scratchiness. I don't know if you can hear it. It's like it's got a little bit of grime still in there, and I did clean it out and I scrubbed it out and I re-oiled it and everything, so it moves well. But there's just that little bit of scratchiness, and sometimes that happens with the lower end horns. The production quality isn't quite as high as it could be, so there's going to be little imperfections, and it might be better if I could really scrub it out real good and get some sort of maybe metal brushes or something else in there, kind of really get all that grime out. But unfortunately, I didn't have any of that. I just had my regular cleaning supplies, and even with that, it's still a little bit scratchy. But overall, it moves fine and it works pretty well, and you can't really hear that scratching when you're playing. It's just a little bit of imperfection. So just a small downside to keep in mind. Everything might not be exactly perfect. So some other things about this, about playing. When I was playing around on it, it was pretty good. I was kind of surprised just how good it was, because I had played one of these. Like I said, I had the Wessex, the original one that they had years and years ago, and I got one of those, and it was pretty much the same exact horn as this, and I thought that one was a little bit stuffy. Of course, it might have been me. I had just started playing trombone, and so I wasn't super good. Obviously, I had just started. But I found that the triggers were just hard to play, and when I tried other people's trombones that they had, they weren't stuffy. So that might have just been some of these horns are stuffy. It's unfortunate because when they're lower quality, they're not made to a super rigorous standards or anything like that. So you do get imperfections. Not every single one is going to come out perfect. But anyway, that's just something to keep in mind, that yours might not be perfectly correct. So sometimes it's good to buy them used as well, or from a reputable dealer. If you get it from someone like Wessex, they do test their horns and they make sure that they're good if they send them out. They have warranties, things like that. But if you're just buying it like from eBay from some Chinese seller who drop ships them, and then it might not be perfectly set up. You might have to go get it adjusted or fixed a little bit. So that's just something to keep in mind as well. But overall, with this specific horn, I was really pleased with it. I would definitely recommend this to a student who's looking to start out. If they saw this online, they're like, oh, hey, I heard those Chinese bass trombones, they're really cheap. That might be pretty good. I'd say go for it. If it's from somebody that, you can ask them, hey, can you send me a recording, and they can play it, and it plays pretty well, and, obviously all of the normal stuff to make sure that the horn's in good shape. But these generally, I'd say, are a pretty good entry-level option. They might not last you very long, obviously, because they're not as high quality. They might break a little bit, but they are pretty sturdy. Obviously, they have a lot of braces and things, and And the one that I had from Wessex, I used it in pep band and marching band and wind ensemble and all of that, and it held up just fine for the year or so that I had it. But it'd be a good option, for a lower cost. You don't have to sink a whole lot of money into it. And if you like it, great. You can go maybe sell this to somebody else who can then get some use out of it, and be able to upgrade later. So it's a great starting option, I'd say, especially since luckily mine came with really good triggers that were pretty free blowing and playing. I was able to use both triggers, and it wasn't fighting me. There wasn't any stuffiness, which is really great. So if you can find one that has been, I'd say, kind of tested, not necessarily used, but if it's, again, someone like Wessex who tests their horns, or somebody else has played it, or you can go test it out yourself, definitely do that. These are a great low budget option for students or people who just want a bass trombone with independent triggers to have on the side. It's a great option. So I'm going to go ahead and play a couple excerpts on this, give you an idea of how it plays, and hopefully you like it. Thanks for watching.